Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unleash Your Brilliant Creativity, Inspiring the Creatrix Within You global event. These are important times to remember who we truly are and to reconnect with our true essence and bring forth our light and let our true nature shine. We're here to guide and support each other on this journey of awakening. When we share our wisdom and magic with as many people as possible, and when we all contribute and collaborate together, we facilitate the global awakening of consciousness and support people everywhere during these times of massive change. Unleash Your Brilliant Creativity, Inspiring the Creatrix Within You is a very special event designed to guide you and inspire you to embody your creative spirit and spark the light with you. Unleash Your Brilliant Creativity, Inspiring the Creatrix Within You is a global event in which female speakers from creatives, coaches, astrologers, artists, healers, visionaries, and mystery school teachers will share their spiritual journey on how they came to bring forth the creative gifts into the world and become who they are today. By sharing our stories, we can inspire women to reconnect to the creatrix, to the sacred divine feminine creative fire that is burning in our hearts. We empower and motivate each other by nurturing our creative spirit and tending our visionary fire. So let's glow. I am Teresa Chaire. I am your host and the creator of this global event. And today I'm delighted to present Veda Austin. Hello, Veda.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. You're truly inspiring. I've been following you for years, so I'm so excited about this conversation. Veda is a water researcher, public speaker, mother, artist, and author. She has dedicated the last 10 years observing and photographing the life of water. She believes that water is fluid intelligence, observing itself through every living organism on the planet and in the universe. Her primary area of focus is photographing water in its state of creation, the space between liquid and ice. It is through her remarkable crystallographic photos that water reveals its awareness of not only creation, but thought and intention through imagery. This is so wonderful. And the topic of the interview is the intelligence of water. So let's dive right into it. Veda, let's talk about it. Is water conscious?
Wow, that's a big question, and a lot of people have asked that question along the last few years after seeing Masaru Emoto's work. So I would say that there are various options that water could be, and one of the ideas is that water could be the glove on the hand of consciousness. Water itself could be conscious. Water is so unknown to us. It seems so interesting because, we use it all the time. We drink it, we bathe in it, all of these different things. And more often than not, we also take it for granted. But at the same time, scientifically, when we're taught about water, we're just taught about it being H2O, about this kind of chemical compound. But it's so much more than that when you start looking at it through the ages. So many, many, many years ago, hundreds of years ago, water in English, it wasn't called water. Water was called the waters. And the only area in the English language, anyway, where outside of biblically, there is this term, the water or the waters, is when we say her waters broke. So that is the only reference to water still being sacred. So is water conscious? From the work that I have seen water respond intelligently rather than react. In the very early stages of my work in crystallography, which is basically just freezing water at a specific stage and photographing it after it's been inspired some way prior to freezing. For example, I might put my hand in the water or think about something, project a thought into the water, and I'll see it crystallized in the ice like an imprint. So when you start wondering, oh, well, is it conscious? I think that when I began this journey, I probably thought that our consciousness was impacting the water. That seemed like probably the most logical. But over the years and becoming in relationship with water, and I would say that my work has exploded the moment I stopped trying to consider what I was doing, experimenting. I'm a body of water that doesn't want to be experimented on. I see that water responds, not just reacts, and has a voice that I'm hearing in a visual way. And so because of that, I don't think that water is just reacting to my consciousness or the environment around it, but I think that water is actually choosing to respond one way or another. And I think that there is a divine consciousness that water embodies, or that embodies water. That would be what I would say to that question, because it's far, far deeper than we, for the last 100, 200 years, have really looked, outside of people like Victor Schauberger, who has seen water at a very different perspective. So yeah, there's a lot more to it, and I can certainly get deeper into that if you would like. But I know we have a number of questions and we don't have a lot of time. So, so there are definite reasons why I would say that I think water embodies divine consciousness. That is relevant because all life has water within it. Anything that procreates has some kind of, it procreates through water, whether even just through eggs, through amniotic fluid, through the jelly-like little eggs that the frogs, create. And so there is always life through the waters. And at death, it's the water that evaporates.
Yes, definitely. And when scientists are looking for life, they look for water, right?
Absolutely.
Outside of our water planet called Earth.
Yeah. Well, even you could take it further. Hopefully that noise isn't bothering you too much. And a lady I know, she says that hydrogen is the spirit of water. And hydrogen is throughout the entire universe. And the sun is hydrogen. So anything that is evaporated, because hydrogen actually means the creator of water. And so when anything is evaporated, it's the creator bringing it back home.
Wow. I'm, wow, just wow. I had no idea about hydrogen, creator of water. Yes, yes. And definitely, like you mentioned, we're also bodies of water.
Yes.
So we are conscious beings. So, and the water, yeah, the water is every life. Thank you for bringing that up. And let's move a little bit into the next question that has, a kind of segue. What does water have to do with spirit?
Well, I kind of touched on it just before, how water evaporates. But I do think, and it does get a little more complex. However, I think of a more spiritual aspect of water. I think there is the physical aspects and the spiritual aspects, much like people, much like anything. We tend to brush everything with the human yardstick so far as intelligence goes. But actually, every living thing has intelligence relative to its form and function. So as far as spirit goes, there was something very profound that happened to me that made me even start to investigate this idea and this concept. My mum, she was my best friend, and she died in 1999 of cancer. And I miss her a lot. And so when I started doing this crystallography, which I've been doing now for over a decade, I nothing's stopping me doing anything. So I asked Water, I said, can you connect to my mum? And before I tell you what I saw in the eyes, to give you some kind of context, I used to live in Japan. I was working over there for a while. And my mum and I would write letters to each other because it was before the days of cell phones and emails and all that stuff. I sound like I'm prehistoric, and so at the end of every letter, Mum would attempt to draw a circle, and her circles were like terrible, and they looked like some kind of map of Australia or something. And then she'd do a little heart inside. And that was kind of like her signature sign off, you know, and I have all these letters from her with that little misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. And Mum and I had, you know, her whole so many years. I was only 27 when she passed away. So we had 27 years together. So it could have been anything that water would have shown me. But when I opened the freezer, there was a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle, just like she would draw. And so now every year on her birthday, I ask Mum to connect to the water, and I see the same shape. And so it's very, very special to me. And I started to think, well, why do many of us in our mind limit water based basically on what we're taught? Because when we think about water, we tend to just think about it in 3 states. And there's also another state, and I suspect there are many more, but the other state is the 4th phase of water, which is more of a plasma. It is the stage between liquid and ice as well. So it absorbs more light, and it has a negative charge. It is more molecularly ordered, and it has various other properties, which I won't get into. So I always say that the secrets are in the subtleties. So every type of water has multiple subtle layers. So in my study of ice, I've observed that water even freezes in 3 stages. There is the stage I take it out, where there's liquid on top and ice underneath. It only takes about 5 minutes, and anyone can learn my technique. Then there is the middle stage, where there is 2 layers of ice and liquid in the middle, and then there is a solid. I think of it as spirit, blood, and body. So in the Maori culture, my father is native New Zealand Maori, the word for spirit is wairua. It means 2 waters. It's a very rudimentary explanation, and there are various others, but essentially the physical and spiritual waters. So what are the physical and spiritual waters? The physical aspect of the water is the water that we see, that we drink, that, you know, flows through our bodies, that is mixed into the plasma. The spiritual aspect of water, I would suggest, is more in the realm of a mirror or an observer. And as an observer, it is not in judgment ever. And there's that saying, you know, if eyes are the windows to the soul, then tears are an expression of spirit. So when I started to think about this idea in the beginning of water as an observer, that was really interesting to me, because I've interviewed a number of people that have had near-death experiences, and many of them tell me the same story. There is this idea that the spirit, that they feel the sense of rising, and then they look down upon their body being resuscitated, and then they move on to another stage. And so as a gas expands, it cools, which is also perhaps what is happening, that this spiritual aspect of water rises like a gas, which is, of course, one of the things that water does, goes from a liquid to a gas, to a solid, to a plasma, however it works, whichever way. And then people call spirit cold. Some people say they feel spirit around them and it's cold. Well, that would also kind of make some sense to me. And then there is the observer, the looking down upon the body. Now, how does the spirit leave the body and come back to the body? Doesn't the spirit need to be in the body to animate it? And I go into this idea much more in my kind of ancient mysteries webinars, but essentially we have electrical charge when we are alive. And even upon death, there is still some activity within the brain that science have talked about and discovered, that goes on for about 10 minutes. And even after that, Dr. Jerry Pollack, who's a friend and mentor of mine, was on one of my webinars, and he was saying that one of his students did a study on eggs, on chicks, you know, chickens, and they had a chicken that they had started to let it grow, you know, from the egg, and they can see it within the egg. At 4 days, you see that it's just started to kind of grow, and it has a heartbeat. It hasn't become a full-fledged chick yet. So they stopped the heartbeat because they wanted to see if the exclusion zone water would drop with all the other vital signs. The exclusion zone water is that special type of water inside of our cells that I just talked about as being like fourth phase water. And so what they noticed is that it dropped, but not all the way. And when they put infrared light near it, actually the exclusion zone grew and took 2 or 3 hours to actually come back down and stop. So he actually suggested that we may need to consider when someone is dead based on when the water has stopped moving through the body. And when there is any movement, there is some charge, because we are made of salt water and salt water is electrical. If there's movement, there's some charge. So I think that the spiritual water and the spirit, if you will, is tethered by electrical charge to the body. And so you're able to leave the body. And if that's why those defibrillators, they get this charge back. And as soon as that comes back, if there's any charge, the soul is able to come back. And because water is full of being able to store information and have this, what we might term as memory, well, one of the reasons we have memory is also to learn. And so I think there's a lot of focus on water memory, but there's not as much focus on this idea of what we're learning from water, what water's learning and what water's showing us. So I think that there is this concept that water and spirit are so intertwined that they are in relationship with one another. And it could even be, possibly, that one day science will advance enough that we will actually be able to see the spiritual essence water leave the body upon death, so that we can see the spirit leave. So when we think about people that say they've seen a ghost, or they can see spirit as it leaves a body, they often talk about it in a kind of a mist or a vapor. Well, this is of course relating to water. This is a topic I would normally talk on for maybe 1.5 hours. So it's very deep to ask about the water and the spirit, but I think it's a special one, because when you look at that, when you look at water, water doesn't die. It's only ever in one of its states. It will just be transmuting from one state to another state. It reincarnates for all to see on this planet. There is no life without it. And so if we are bodies of water, and even in the Bible, it talks about water and spirit. In fact, in the Bible, water is mentioned 722 times more than love, more than worship. And so you look at these things in the Quran, it says all things are made of water. You look at the Upanishads, it talks about the same thing. You go across the board from religion to philosophy. Again, there is water and spirit and God interwoven within each other, all over the place. So it doesn't seem unusual to me at all that this idea that water and spirit are connected, and that it is one of the ways in which spirit leaves the body, and also one of the ways in which we can observe ourselves when we're alive. When people have this idea, that not just an idea, but when people have an experience, like my son, he broke his wrist and he had to go to hospital to get it set, and the doctor gave him ketamine, and he said, Rama's going to be here, but he's not exactly going to be here. So I watched Rama kind of just awake whilst he's having his arm set completely high off his head. And then when he came back, I asked him, like, what was that like? And he said, well, Mum, God, it was so crazy, I can hardly explain it. He said, but he was watching himself from the corner of the room being like fixed, I guess, and his arm being set. And then he said he went down this wormhole and he did all kinds of other stuff, but he observed himself from another place. How is that possible? Many people through meditation, many through psychedelic experiences, many people through near-death experiences have observed themselves. I think that's through water.
Wow, this is deeply, deeply, nourishing, and I feel hydrated. Speaking of the water, it's very hydrating, and that's why I like to share this with others. And yeah, definitely, I have heard from one of my teachers. I study Aztec mythology, and we talked about death and when the body dies, and there was always that aspect. Also, do not touch the body for at least 10 to 12 hours. Let it be, because the spirit is still there. It's not that they just die and completely over. So there
Mhm.
is something to that as far as the spirit and the body, the physicality and the connection to be there. And yeah, I mean, we are our first 9 months, we're in the water, in the womb. And so it does
Absolutely.
make sense that we go back to that aspect. And this plasma state, I know I have read the book of the fourth state, that the fourth stage of
Phase.
water, the plasma. Yeah. And that's really fascinating and interesting. And that brings me also to a point to segue in a little bit about memory. You already spoke a little bit about water and memory, how that's also all over the Bible and all over names. So do you really believe that water has memory? And, if you can give us some examples of that, I do believe it. I mean, I know it, you know.
Well, I mean, if you consider that we're all bodies of water and we have memory, one of the things when I think about memory, I think about our life. There's nobody here that would say that they don't have a life because we're alive and we have a life. And what is our life? When we talk about our life is something we remember. Our life has been a series of memories every second. So one of the ways in which to put perspective into it is that when I think about my life, I think I have to remember it. The only thing we have now is this very now moment. Already it's a memory of when we first hopped on this podcast. So we are able to have a memory that encompasses our lives and that makes up our life. It's very, very important to us. So we are, by molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water. There is more water in our bodies than stars in the Milky Way. And if you think about that idea, based on the fact that we can remember it all, if you pardon the pun, we boil it down, we are water, salts, consciousness. Salt is essentially a crystal. Crystals store information. They're in all of our technology. The marriage of salt and water is a very powerful one. I think that when there is salts, water is able to store this, what we term as memory, for longer. It's like a snapshot of what it's been exposed to or what it has absorbed. But I also think it's deeper than that. I think that the more I've studied water, the more I've started to see that it is like a personification of intuition and emotion, but only certain emotions. So water will not design with me, for example. It won't design complex imagery if I am in a particularly bad or frustrated, angry mood. It just won't play with me. Not because it judges me, but simply because it doesn't resonate at the frequency. So that's really been helpful. So when it comes to this idea of memory, yes, I have 44,000 photos of water responding to an inspiration. My very, very first ever work with water was out of curiosity. I'd seen Emoto's work, I'd seen Laurent Costa's work, I'd heard about a man called Thomas Hieronymus that I share with in a lot of my other interviews, but I know we're on a time frame. People can look them up. Where basically they support this idea that water has memory. So I got a petri dish because I'm like, well, the secret's in the freezing. For all these people, they're seeing imagery. Well, actually, Emoto was seeing geometries. So far as from a positive or negative influence, he was seeing geometry or something that was not structured in the ice. Laurent Costa was seeing pictures, which really inspired me. If he would smile at the water sometimes, then he would look down a microscope and he would see smiley faces in the ice crystals. He was seeing hearts. He was seeing fish. He was seeing things that were actually relative to his thoughts or his day. But he wasn't trying to experiment on the water, and he wasn't even trying to do anything to the water. He was simply trying to be the observer the best he could. Then Thomas Hieronymus observed that the freshly placed organs of an animal, when he went into a Parisian meat market on a cold day, seemed to be affecting the way that the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. So the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And he put that down to there being water in the blood, in the fresh blood. Each organ has a sonic signature, which is like a cymatic imprint for form and function. And it was sharing information with the water in the air, because water is always communicating with itself. And when it hit the glass, it formed into the shape of the organ. So I thought, okay, I'm going to project a thought into the water and I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to slap it in my freezer at home and I'm going to just, just play. No idea of what would happen. So I had my dish. I projected. I was thinking, what am I going to think about? There was a bit of fluff in the dish, so I put my hand in to take out the fluff. And I thought, oh, I wonder if my hand will impact the water's memory. I thought, oh, that'll do. I threw it in the freezer, forgot about it. This was before I developed my new technique. I froze it solid. I look at my work back for a year when I froze water solid, and I'm amazed I got any imagery. But the first picture, when I pulled it out, was of such a clear hand. It was like an x-ray of my hand. I showed my son and I asked him what it looked like. He said it looked like a hand. I did a survey that Jerry Pollack recommended that I do after having done this for quite some time. And 290 something people did the survey. It was 20 pictures and it simply said, what does this look like to you? No leading questions. And around 82% of people could recognize the images for what the influence was prior to freezing, but there were 3 where 100% of people recognized the image, and the hand was one of them. So I think that we can say that that's not pareidolia, like, oh, it just kind of looks like this, I think it's looked like this, when so many people recognize the imagery. And it suggests that there was an imprint of what water saw, but it didn't make my hand look like it does right in this moment with the flesh. It literally looked like an x-ray. But then I've used pictures of people's faces, like my friend Wendy. She's become like the iconic face of water because I used her photo so much, where I put the petri dish of water on her photo for 30 seconds, removed and froze, and her portrait is in the water. Then I showed water the portrait that it had, the designer from the ice, and it designed that, a negative of it. And then I've let water melt and refrozen it to see is the face still there. And I've done that with multiple aspects of my work where I've let the water freeze and refrozen it to see how long the imprint lasts for. And I can only do that about 7 times because I don't use a lot of water. But I can see that there are some times where water has had that memory for every single freeze over a period of 2 to 3 weeks. So I would say that would be evidence of water memory.
Yeah, wow, this is so fantastic. Yeah, and I've seen your work and I've seen that. And to go, and I love it. This is your creative endeavor. You get curious about it, and the water is such an inspiration to you and to me as well. And I hope the audience can, get inspired either by water. And that's also like observation, like you mentioned, observing ourselves. And that's a good way of learning what is it that sparks that fire within me to create something or to dive into something and be creative in that way. And I want to share with you a couple, because I've had a lot of water, I call it drops or downloads as well throughout the years, and that's kind of what took me down this path. One of them is, the saying is written in the stars. It means like something in the future. So to me it came is written in water. That's the memory, that's the past, because like you mentioned, we can observe the water, like, the icebergs, that tells the past story of the earth. The rivers, you know, it starts from the snow, melts into the ocean, the whole cycle of water. So there's something I've written about that, and just kind of like that came to me, and I'm like, yes, it's written in water. And like, all water has been here all this time. It just moves from one form of energy to another. And the other drop that I had, this was maybe 5, 6 years ago. I was on a call, a spiritual call, and they mentioned that the mountain ranges in the world communicate with each other. There's a connection, and they communicate via the clouds, because the clouds travel and reach all the mountains. And at that time, I was working in high tech. And I'm like, the cloud, you know, we have the cloud nowadays, you know, doesn't mean the cloud up there, but the cloud. And I was like, my wheel started turning, and I was like, well, what is the cloud in the technologies where you can put a document or something that anybody from anywhere in the world can access that? And I remember one of the shamans saying, sometimes we create the technology before we are actually there. So I'm like, what if the cloud is just the consciousness? We can put up there the consciousness, you know, my consciousness, that anybody else in the world can access that, where, you know, telepathic you know, conversation or everything is accessible to anybody if you are like in that state of consciousness, you know. So yes, the water has
That's one of the best explanations I have heard for years. And I've heard a lot of people speak about a lot of things, but I think that you're onto something there. And the reason we get goosebumps when we like know that something's right is also the water like raising up, going, oh, hello, there's
getting
something
there
up.
right now. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said, and very relevant. And so those, you know, and also I find that I get some of my like what I think we have kind of a lot of recycled thoughts, and then we have inspired thoughts. And the inspired thoughts for me often come when I'm in the shower. You know, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, I don't know, it just came out of nowhere. I'm going to do that. That's a good idea. And intuition. It's like, oh, you know, this feeling, I feel like I should do something, I should do this. And then there's a communication between perhaps the cloud and the intuition within us. And I think that this idea of divine inspiration is, we all have it, you know, even when things are possibly terrible, you know, there's always the opportunity for divine inspiration to come, and in a time where there's a time to surrender some of the regurgitated thoughts. We all can do that. I think of it kind of like the dense mind and the light mind. And we have a dense mind which regurgitates a lot of our thoughts daily, and that sometimes leading us away from where we really want to go. You know, often we have that feeling, I know I should be doing something, or I should be going to the gym, or I should leave this relationship, or I should. But what is it that actually gets it to that point where it's like, I'm going to do this? And it can be such a small thing, but it takes just one step or one word, being yes or no even. And so to me, that's often come either from really truly listening to my intuition, or having some kind of inspired thought to go ahead with something that just takes over. And when you let it take over, it's going to take you somewhere. And if we think about water, water is always going back to source. It has all kinds of tributaries. We can go in all different directions, just like water does, but it's always going back to source. And I think when you think about water, I always say that water isn't a resource, it is source. And when you realize we're source on a journey to source, then we're already here. And the fact that we can imagine and have this imagination, I think, is also part of water's work. I think we have this ability to store memory. I think that's also within the water, but also in the salts. That's helpful. We're not distilled water. We are an ocean. But also, I think then when you get into the subtle layers, there is this area where it is full of inspiration, and we know that feeling. We know that feeling within us when we are inspired to try something new, even if it's a little scary. I have done that many times. And sometimes, yeah, I think there's sometimes that just it happens where we just go, I just know I need to try something different. Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting it to be different. So sooner or later, something's got to give. And I think water has everything to do with everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so deeply profound. Yeah, like you say, also gives me the goosebumps are the truth bumps, like you feel it, the deep truth within your soul. And another aspect that you touched on about water and for me to connect it with technology is the crystals. Every computer has them.
Yeah.
And what is that for? For the memory, for the computer to be consciously recording that memory of what we're creating here, right? On the airwaves.
Yeah. Well, Jerry Pollack was talking, I know they're working in their fourth phase water lab, and I'm not going to explain it well because I've watched the video for a while, but essentially there is a scientist that somehow was able to collect fourth phase water, and when it actually the fourth phase, it's water in a plasma state, but it can crystallize into like almost like a crystal powder. This is water that can crystallize into a crystal powder, and they can put it into micro like chips like that go into our computer, to hold memory, and use them for that reason. That's what they're working on. And so that then tends to lead me to think, well, there has to be this incredibly vast opportunity for water to store memory if they can do that in this fourth phase aspect. And I think salt and water have an interwoven marriage that naturally work together. But I think water on its own can store memory, but I also think it can go up to the cloud where it can like be in a different state. And salt too. Salt's another thing that doesn't die. Actually, it's an interesting avenue of crystals. Crystals, if you just left them alone, they just keep growing. Those giant crystals in Mexico, they're just, I don't really want to go there one day. But if you put some salt into water, it disappears. And it will give water an electrical component. It will marry with water, but you can't see it anymore. It's like it's just disappeared. If you put enough in, you can taste it, that's it. But when you let the water evaporate, the salt crystals are still there. When someone is cremated, even the ashes of that person are actually salts. So salt is not something that dies either. So we're made of these three things that could be immortal: water, salt, and consciousness. And so that gives me a lot of hope and inspiration.
Definitely, yes. And it's so inspiring to hear these, I don't know, the consciousness part of it and how we can create and get inspired. And like you mentioned, listen to our intuition, be hydrated as well. I feel that nowadays it might be hard, to be hydrated with actual water, having all these energy drinks or things going around, being hydrated and salt as well, like the importance of it. And I love this because this is very educating for people to know these, so you can be really conscious and inspired, and the embodiment of your best self. And yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit, if we can go back into what inspired you to go down this road, dive into the waters.
Well, there were numerous inspirations, but I would say I was in a horrendous car accident 26 or 7 years ago now. And we went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice. The car started to spark. The driver was decapitated. It was one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone lived, which was me. I was the passenger. And I had 8 surgeries over the course of 20 or so years, mostly for bowel surgery because the seatbelt had crushed my lower abdomen. And I had internal bleeding, and when they anyway, it's a whole thing. So lots of surgery, and also had surgery for endometriosis, stage 4 endometriosis, which I know many women suffer from, and I no longer have it. And I think that's empowering too, because we always get told that you can't get rid of it. And I think that I as you hear this story, you realize that I don't like being told what I can't do, especially with my own body. Nobody knows my body better than me. And so, when I had my last surgery, which was bowel surgery, I woke up surrounded by doctors telling me that they had that I hadn't recovered well, and that during the surgery they found showers of blood clots in my lungs because of the surgery, because of that, and that I needed to possibly be on warfarin for the rest of my life, which is blood thinners. And I was in my early 20s, and I was young, I was fit, I was healthy, I looked after myself, and I was shocked that that had happened. And they said, look, you're going to die if you don't do this, and, you know, blah, blah. So for a few months, I took warfarin. And I was definitely the youngest person in the clinic when you go there to get tested and you get your blood samples and blah, blah. And so I hated it. And I knew my body could heal naturally. And when I went and had a clean bill of health, they did an X-ray and they said that there's no clots there. And I'm not saying that other people should do this. I mean, everybody needs to make their own decision. I need to say that. But I made a decision that my body was perfectly capable of being well, and I was going to keep it well. And that the reason it happened was because of too much surgery and anesthetic. So I went on this journey, and I ended up speaking to a friend who's a medical doctor and practices Ayurvedic medicine as well. And he said, look, totally off the record, maybe you want to find a natural source of high alkaline water, natural, emphasis on natural, not ionized, and unnaturally ionized. And he said that might help your body come back into balance. So I started trialing my body on all kinds of naturally alkaline waters. And eventually and by that time I had a wellness center, and I have some gifts of healing. I'd set that up from tragedy too. I was in both the Christchurch earthquakes, and my house was destroyed. And I ended up losing it was as a miracle I'm even here, and on so many levels. I'm currently telling you 2 tragic stories at the same time. But the second earthquake, it's like the 4th bedroom that we just had built sunk down with liquefaction. There you could see outside, the walls were like, you know, broken. And I was like going down this, when it happened, I threw the phone down, grabbed my daughter, and she literally, if I'd not picked it up any sooner, the big TV would have smashed on her. She was only like 5 months old. And so then I'm like, I run outside, and I look inside, and it's like, oh my God, like it was so scary. And I didn't know if it was going to be safe to even go back in the house. So when the aftershock stopped, I ran and got nappies and passports just in case I was never be able to get back in the house. I rang my ex-husband, and he was with our son, and he had just watched a building collapse and a man somehow get out. And so I off-roaded because there were cars literally upside down in holes. Like, it was crazy. and lots of people died in that earthquake. And so I picked him up, and then traffic was so bad, I had to get my other son. I have 3 children, and he was at school. So I ran, and on the left were the houses, on the middle was the road, and then on the right was the school where the children were waiting. So I went to cross, but there was liquefaction over the whole road. When I crossed, I didn't realize that there was a car-sized hole under the ground. I sunk into it, and I was like, couldn't touch the bottom, screaming for help with liquefaction up to my chest. And this man tries to pull me out, and then he gets stuck in, and then someone pulls him out, then he pulls me out. I'm this giant mud monster. Get to my son. Fine, okay, yeah, he recognizes me. And then finally get home and leave Christchurch the next day. And it was terrible and scary. And then I come back to the car accident. And, you know, I found that when I started to drink, oh, well, I'll get to that part. So I had this wellness center, and somebody said to me, you know, I know this old guy who's got his own private source of water, and he's only giving it to cancer patients. It's 9.9 out of the ground. Maybe you want to try some. So I went to go and try it, and he gave me a month's worth to try because I told him my whole story and all the rest of it. And I noticed on day 3 of drinking it, I was drinking a liter in the morning and a liter at night outside of food, because you shouldn't drink alkaline water with food. And on day 3, I noticed a change in bowel motions that was really a good change, because after so much bowel surgery, you want to see that. Plus, it's an indicator of our internal health. Whether or not we're sitting on the toilet trying to push out a pebble for an hour, that means we're probably pretty dehydrated. On day 10, I had all these bumps coming up on my arm and jaw that were really painful. And I was like, what's going on? And so I ended up like getting some tweezers and like digging in there and pulling something out, which was a little shard of green glass. Between day 10 and 12, I pulled out 27 pieces of green glass out of my arm and jaw. They had been in my body for over 20 years, because the man who died owned a nightclub. In the back of the car, there were crates of Steinlager beer, and they were green glass. And when the car rolled, this side of my body got more of that, a lot of that green glass, and the other side got more windscreen. So, you know, I'm I was amazed. I'm like, how can water? Because I knew I hadn't done anything different, because I was trialing myself on different waters. So how can it push out this glass? It was like pushing out a horrible memory. And so I started to investigate and look at the analysis, and it's like, well, you know, yes, there's a lot of bicarb, which makes the high pH, and it's got this and that and the other. But when we only study water by looking at an analysis, all we learn is about what water holds, not what water is. That's like me taking blood from you and saying, okay, now I know every single thing there is to know about you in your entire life. But all I'm really going to know is about you chemically, not so much about what your memories are or what you did when you were 5 or what kind of food you like to eat. So it was I started to realize that when you look at what Tesla says, if you want to know the secrets to the universe, look at frequency, vibration, and energy. I thought, well, how can I learn that about water? And that's what led me on to this journey. This is when I started to read about the idea of water storing information and sharing it within a crystallographic medium, which is ice. This is when I started to learn about Emoto's work and all the other people I've shared. It's when I started to investigate for myself. And I also found that with that water, I trialed it on all the people, lots and lots of people in my wellness center, and everybody's health improved, from incremental improvement for athletes to someone who did a 27-day water fast with it from stage 4 cancer and had no cancer 2 weeks afterwards, which is not to say that that was the only reason. He did a lot of other work. But across the board, everybody's eyesight improved. Our eye lens is 99% water. We literally see everything through water.
Wow, how beautiful. And I love that, yeah, that we see through the lens of water. And you say also the eyes are the window to the soul, right? So that's I love it. And for you, it was the healing with water that led you down this journey of awakening to water, to the wisdom and intelligence of water.
And
And
I
I love it.
just
Yeah.
I'm curious. You know, being curious and not being afraid to be curious and ask questions that might seem stupid. You know, it's like, well, I mean, God, I just know everyone thought I was probably a bit nuts for a few years doing this work. Go, you know what? Look at this picture. Look at this picture. I mean, I'm a researcher, yes, but I was working as a professional artist for a lot of my life too. So I see the world through an artistic lens. So it was quite a radical change to start going in this direction. And I'm like, but I'm seeing these cool things. And I know people thought, "Oh, you know, it's a fad. She'll get, you know, it's been a good part of 8 years before anyone started to take any of it seriously. That's a big, long commitment of keeping up with something. And my children grew up with it. So they
Mm.
saw, and now they get to see that millions, like thousands of other people are doing this work. I think that's part of the science, that lots of other people see either a signature pattern, an artistic expression, or hydroglyphs. And we probably don't have time to get into too much about what they are.
Mm.
But a signature pattern is essentially a pattern that you recognize either that's rain or that's spring water or that's tap water. So you will see either that or that's filtered water. And then you have the art, which I've just talked about, but then you have hydroglyphs. To get one hydroglyph, I use words as my inspiration. I'll write a word, put my dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds, remove, freeze. And if I see the same symbol appear using the same word at least 50 times, then I have one hydroglyph. And a hydroglyph is essentially this language of water. So I can actually start to understand what water is saying. And I will leave it off, perhaps, at what the most powerful thing that water has taught me about hydroglyphs, because people go, well, what is the point about hydroglyphs? So what is the point? And I would say that the point is that this is a voice for the voiceless. And that for each word, each symbol, there are multiple words, which we're still learning. This is in its infancy. So a woman reached out to me and she learned about my work. And she told me that her daughter was severely disabled, unable to communicate verbally in any way, just made sounds and couldn't write or anything like that. And I don't know how she found out about me. And she got me at the perfect time when I had quite a vocabulary, if you will, of hieroglyphs. And she said, I just want to know if my daughter knows how much I love her. And she said, if I ask her that question and I record her sounds afterwards, can you freeze that and see what water shows? I said, of course. And I did. And there were 4 hydroglyphs in the ice. There was what we call the empty hexagon, which means individual, but it also means I. There was a heart, which means love. There was a hydroglyph, which looks like lots and lots of little circles all together. And that means to multiply. It also means many or a lot, like a lot. And then the last one was the hydroglyph, which looks like a speckledy pattern, which means earth. And it also means mother. She said, I love you so much, Mummy. So the same question that the mother had been wanting to know about the daughter, does she know how much I love her? The daughter wanted the mother to know. And I was lucky enough to be on FaceTime when she showed the daughter and told the daughter, and her daughter tried to clap her hands. And it was one of the most profound things that I have used hydroglyphs for, that water has been enabled to speak for someone who couldn't speak.
Wow, that's absolutely beautiful and yeah, heartwarming. And I love it. I love it how you have developed all of these to be able to connect people to water, to each other, and like you say, voice for the voiceless. And yeah, you're like the perfect mix of science, the scientist, and the spirituality coming together. Because I feel I have learned from several like shamanic ways that like science is catching up to the spiritual world of all these ancient, tribes that they knew things they knew without having the instruments that we have of today. And like I feel like a lot of modern day people do seeing is believing, but there's other ways of the intuition and that consciousness that we know I don't need. I don't need to see it too, like and water, we see it in certain shapes or forms, but sometimes we don't. Like you say, it's all around us, and you don't see it, unless it's in my glass or whatever the shape of the container that the water is in. So thank you so much. That's so beautiful. And just if we go into it, if you can tell us real quick what's coming up for you. I know you mentioned you're working on a book. You want to share a little bit about that?
I am really excited about that. So I've just written a book called The Living Language of Water, and it has something like, well, over 1,300 photos of my work in it. It covers all kinds of topics from from things like energy healing, frequency, thoughts, words, a big music section of lots of different types and genres of music, and how water's responded to all kinds of music. It's got a whole section on my egg albumin study, which we didn't get to talk about, but it's a study I did on a type of egg white and why that's so inspiring. On different bodily fluids like tears and blood, and urine, and how we can use my freezing technique for all of these different types of things. What I have learned. So it's a very, and you can learn my technique at the back. So it's like an all-in-one kind of a thing, which covers the indigenous aspect too. Obviously, I have the Maori part in me, but I think that the voices of the ancient and the indigenous are vital more than ever. Like that, it's always been important, but in this time where I think that reductionism is not the way we're going to ever learn about water. Where we're going to learn about water is to see it as a whole living system. That's where we're going to advance in our understanding of water. And this is what the indigenous talk about. The Maori people think that water is a living being and that our ancestors are within there. And I think that then implies this really big responsibility of caring for the water. And if we think that water can teach us, we'll learn from it. If we think that it's got the ability to communicate, we'll listen. Yeah, so the book is coming up, very important, and that I'll be doing a book tour, an American book tour. We're still figuring out the dates, but probably around the beginning of June, doing book signings and things like that. And I'm self-publishing, so we're going to be not just doing it in bookstores, but like in really cool places like that communities are hosting. Hoping even to go to Mexico on that trip. And then in October, I am as long as everything goes forward, we're still raising money for the annual water conference to help Dr. Jerry Pollack's conference go ahead. Not enough people signed up or booked last year to go, which shocked me because I've been to a couple of them and they were fantastic. So we're me and Dr. Catherine Clinton are helping promote that and setting up a GoFundMe and doing various things to help raise money to help to make sure that that doesn't happen again and that it goes ahead. So all things going well, that will be I'll be speaking in Lisbon in October at the Water Conference and also doing a speaking event tour in the UK and Europe and doing book signings and things like that. On top of, I think, I don't know if if I don't mention the name, I think I'm allowed to. There's my show on Gaia is still out right now, like not my show, but my interview with Regina Meredith, and coming up. Just maybe keep watching Gaia, because I'll be probably on a few other things.
Wow, thank you. I look forward to that because yeah, when you come to the US this summer, hopefully, so I'm in California, you know, and Central Valley in California, close to Yosemite and close to a lot of water. You know, actually the city that I live in is called Riverbank. So, you know, the water theme is all over the place. Thank you, Veda. And oh, Veda has a wonderful gift for us. Thank you so much. It's called the CMP Technique Guide. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. It's just my freezing technique. It's called CMP, which stands for collective molecular photography, because I think the water is working as a kind of, the water molecules are working as a kind of collective, and to see, so we can see imagery. And so people, when they go to my website, which is my name, vedaaustin.com, go to shop and you'll see the CMP technique there. So when you check out, just put the word blessing into the code word blessing in, and it'll be free. So you can learn how to do this at home.
Yeah, thank you so much. And all that information will be right below this video on the website. So you can just click on it and receive it. Thank you so much, Veda, for being here with us. This wonderful hydrating time. I love it. I know there's so much more I want to ask you and talk about. I could just be here all day. Thank you for coming in from beautiful New Zealand. We didn't say that, but that's what Veda is right now, where she lives. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.